Okay, let's get started. This webinar will not go into a lot of detail because there just is not enough time to do so. My goal is to show you a little bit of what Drill and Blast module can do for you. First, we need to go ahead and put some initial values. So if we go to set up initial values, I'd recommend that you go ahead and fill out as much as you can in this form. Set up initial values and fill this out as much as you can right here. And you see I've got some of this filled out already. Okay. Also, you need to go ahead and set up initial values for charging. I would recommend that you define as much as possible prior to laying out the holes. So if we go to setup, initial, or charging, and then let's just rip that bad boy off, and we'll make it smaller. That out of the way, and we'll go. There's the first three we really need to do. We'll come back to charge templates, and then we look at the fourth one. So explosives, I would highly recommend that you fill out as much as you can because you may use these later on in your charge templates. And also, what's important is definitely put the display definitions in here for your different consumables. So this is explosives. Here's your whole consumables, and these have already been filled out. Your surface consumables, again, if you have a unit cost and description, let's go ahead and put it back in here. We'll come back to charge templates later on when we define one for our blast. And then of course your reports, set your display definitions for your downhole or your decimals, and then your summaries. Okay, so let's go ahead and close all these things out. The last thing you need to do is fill out the controls under initial setup and set up initial controls. This will define how the blast holes will be named. More often than not, you will select row letters as your blast hole naming. So if we go to setup initial controls and ensure that it says row letters. Okay. Next, I would recommend you go ahead and create a contour of the area where you will be laying out the blast holes. This also helps define any limits you may need to help limit the blast holes. In here I've got my topography on. Turn on the annotation. Next, you need to lay out your blast polygon. This is the area where you want to lay out or plan the blast holes. Remember, you can only lay out blast holes within domain polygon or limit polygon. I've created these under the domain layer. Notice I have a previous blast and my current blast. You will also need to have a start and finish line to lay out the blast holes. Typically, this start line will be determined from the end line of the previous blast. Anytime, if you're unsure about where you need to go in your blasting, if you go to blast status, it will tell you what you need to do. And in this case, I really haven't done anything, so I've got a lot to do. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create a blast. There might be other blasts available to pick from, but I'm going to create a new blast from my design. This needs to be accomplished before anything else can happen. So we go to blast, create. I will go ahead and fill out the form as much as you can. And this first off is a blast name. I'm creating mine called Des01, Design 01. It could be whatever naming convention you want for your blasting. Also, I've picked the region I want to work in, the drill name, the designer, the design date, and status. This all comes from the initial values. Okay, you want to make sure that you have your domain layer on, because when I hit OK, it's going to ask me to select the domain polygon. Okay, and you will notice that a new layer has been added, and it's called Des01. Now we can start laying out our blast holes, but I want to ensure that I have a start line and an end line. I put these in a layer called DB start line. So if I go ahead and turn off domain polygon and do DB start line, turn off my topography, I don't need that on any longer, and so have my start line and my finish line. Also check once again that you have the correct blast hole naming set. This can be checked under the initial controls. We've done that, but it's always good practice to go back and look at it again. So if we go to setup initial controls and make sure it's set to row letters, which it is, perfect. Okay, now we need to go ahead and fire up the form. So if we go to layout, layout holes, line layout, first thing we want to do is row line generation. Okay, first thing you need to do in this form is specify the burden start and end, and also specify the spacing. So my burden is going to be 7 meters and 7 meters, and my spacing is going to be 10 meters. Okay, And as you see in the form, what you do is you select your in row first. So if you hit that button, select your in row, and then I'm going to select my start row. Then I'm going to use the next button under the layout controls. This way I can manage how many blast hole rows I want to generate. You can also use the remaining button and to lay out the blast hole rows. If you notice, the number within the input area will change when the number of rows are generated. This way you can start and stop the process and the system knows where you left off. So I'll go next, and you can see it on the screen because it created another layer called des01_rows. So there's my fourth one, my fifth one, and there's my sixth one. Okay, after the last row is generated, the last thing you need to do is create the holes. The system has only generated the rows and location of the holes. If you forget this step, you cannot then go on to projecting the blast holes, which is ultimately needed so the blast holes can be charged. So I'm going to hit create holes. Okay, it's telling me it generated 174 blast holes down at the bottom. I'm going to make that layer current. I'm going to turn everything else off. I'm going to center and rotate. And if you notice, I will also set the controls for annotation. If they're not on yet, you want to go to Setup, Blast, Set Display, and look for the tab Annotations. And you want to ensure that at minimum you have hole number select or hole names number selected. Okay, and then hit OK, and make sure your annotations are on. And if they're too big or too small, you can go to Settings, Drawings, Annotations, and set your sizes. Mine are set to 0.3, which is a good size. Okay. Also notice after I rotate that these have no depth to them. Okay. Now before we move on to the next process, I want to clean up some of the blast holes. There are a few blast holes that are within the domain blast polygon, but are within a drilling limit that I do not want to drill at this time. So if I turn on my limits, I'm going to rotate my project data again. If you notice there, this green polygon right here, I don't want any of these holes outside that polygon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clean those up right quick. Okay, I'm going to hide some stuff that I don't want to delete by accident. So I'm just going to hide. And what I'll do now is I'll just go ahead and select the elements I want to delete. Okay. I don't want to delete that polygon, but I'll get that in a minute. So I'll select these over here. This is just as simple as that, to delete these holes that you don't want. Hit the delete key. So I've deleted those holes I no longer need. I'll show the hidden elements again. Everything's looking good. So now after the blast holes are created, which we have on the screen, they need to be projected to the surface to get the total depth for charging of the holes. So if we go to Layout, Line Layout, you see in this form, we're going to go to the Project Blast Holes form. Okay. You want to go ahead and fill out the hole diameter, dip, and dip direction. If you're doing pre-split holes, then you would be more than likely in this area put the angle of high wall you're trying to create. In our case, they're going to be vertical. So 90 degrees and 90 degrees. Hole displays white, white, that's fine. Now you want to go ahead and put the top surface cutoff along with the bottom surface cutoff. If a schema will be used, ensure you have set the schema in the Strat Model Schema field. In my case, I don't have a schema. I've defined a top and a bottom. As you can see in the form, I also have a standoff of 1 meter. This means that the blast holes will be projected to 1 meter above coal. This is to ensure that the coal will be protected from the blast. As an example, if you put a negative value, this means that the blast holes will be projected through the surface, whatever value is in the field. If, for example, I put -1, then the blast holes will be located in this example, des roof -1. I'm also going to apply stemming intersection in each of the blast holes. This is important so that when the charging occurs, we get the right powder factor determined along with the correct ample length and mass. In this example, I'm going to use limit polygons to define the areas to apply the stemming depth to. In my design, I am assuming that any blast hole that is less than 14 meters, I will be applying a stemming of 1 meter, and anything above 14 meters, I will be applying a stemming of 4 meters. I've created surface expressions with different display definitions to see the difference, and the projection will have to be run twice because I'm limiting the blast holes that will be processed by the limit polygons. So the first thing I will do is go ahead and select the stem 1 polygons and then all the blast holes within that polygon. I will then run the projection over that surface. So let's pick that. I will also make sure I pick the stem 1 blast holes. Okay, everything's good. I'll hit apply. They should turn white, which they did, so that's cool. Now I'll go ahead and do stem 04 surface. Okay, and I've highlighted these areas over here, so if I pick this polygon, I only get those holes that has a stemming 04, so those holes are greater than 14 meters. I hit apply. Good, I can close that form now. I'll just make sure that holes are on. I'll center about one of those holes. I'll rotate them, and as you can see, I've got two different display definitions. Now if you do details on the blast hole and then select the vertex tab, you'll see a detail about each one of these holes. So I'll do it for the 4 meter one. So I go to vertex, you can see that downhole depth is 4. So I have topo intersection, I have a stem 04 intersection, and then my roof with a standoff of 1 meter. And again, if I do it with the 1 meter, same thing. In this case, it's a 1 meter standoff. 1 meter stem, 1 meter standoff, and there's my topography. Okay. Now we need to move ahead and get the blast holes ready for charging. Before powder factors can be assigned, areas of influence need to be calculated. I will let MineScape calculate the areas of influence. Then I will edit and or update areas where I think there's too much blast hole influence. So I'm just going to use a collar area because my blast holes are vertical. If I had inclined dipping blast holes, I would use collar areas and toe areas. This way I would get an average. So if I go to layout, let's go back to top view fit. Let's rotate it. Now if I go to layout, areas of influence, and calculate, I'm going to calculate based on collar area. So if I hit apply or hit OK, so there are my polygons, areas of influence. As you can see, some of these areas need to be reassigned. Okay, so after this, I will use the assign feature to adjust the area of influence, and each blast hole can have a different area of influence. I'm going to adjust mine all the same. So if I go to layout, areas of influence, assign, I'm going to assign it based on burden spacing. Cat apply, and I'm just going to do a few because you'll get the idea of what's going on. So there you go. I've adjusted those a bit. Now we're ready to charge the holes. So I'm going to make those holes current. Now we're ready to charge the holes. You should go ahead and create a charge template. This can be created under setup, charging, charge template. So setup, charging, charge templates. And in my case, you notice I've got the template name. I make that the same as my blast name. And in this case, templates are built from bottom to top. I'm putting a booster at the bottom of the hole, and then ample will also start at the bottom of the hole and fill up to the stemming length specified in the hole. If you have decking or if you're trying to do something more complicated, you can go ahead and build your charge template accordingly. Just keep in mind that you probably need to have surface intersections to apply the changes to. So in my case, a booster at the bottom, ample, and then stemming. Say OK. First thing that needs to happen is for you to initialize the charges. This basically creates a charge blast hole object. So if I got a charge, initiate charge. Okay, and notice now I have a different display definition, and it's created a layer called Deso1 charge. Next, you need to charge holes based on a charge template. It's important to note that depending on the surface intersection name used within the blast hole was intersected, this name needs to be applied to the charge template. As an example, what you need to do is highlight that first bunch of holes with the stemming of 01. So if I turn on my limits, and you can see I have that polygon. So I'm going to ensure that I've selected that polygon, and it's giving me those holes. I'll go ahead and do the charge holes, and in this case I'm going to charge it with the 01 first. Do a cat apply. Okay, you can check, and if you rotate, you'll notice that the display definition has been changed to dashes. This just lets you know that the blast holes have not had the charge finalized. So before I finalize the charge, I will go ahead and create a reference hole to ensure that I will eventually charge the correct charge. So if I do a reference hole, I'm going to select any one of these holes. Okay, and it's just going to build a little template down here at the bottom left for me. Okay, it shows 1 meter. I'm going to remove that reference. I'm going to do it again so you can see a little better. And again, all it's doing is creating a reference hole for you. As you can see, the reference hole will show how the hole is charged, and it identifies the stemming, it identifies the amphel. So now I need to go ahead and create the reference hole for the 4 meter stem after I've built the 4 meters. So I'll go ahead and delete that, go back to top view, do the rotation. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure I've got stem 04 selected. Okay, got those holes selected. I'll do a cat apply and hit the. Notice that those are -2. You know how to do. I'm not going to show a reference. You've seen how that works. And after initial charge and after blast holes were reviewed using the reference holes, they can now be finalized. All you have to do is go to charge and finalize holes. So let's cancel this. Let's go to charge, finalize charges. That design or that blast. Okay. As you can see, the dashed lines representing the blast hole depth have all turned to a solid line string. This means that the holes have all been charged. So we'll go back to top view. Now we're ready to tie in the blast holes and get ready to simulate the blast. So I'm going to rotate this thing again, zoom in. What I'm going to do is turn off my limit. I'm going to make sure my charge is my current layer. Turn that off. Now all I have to do is get ready to charge this. So if I go to charge, tie in, choose your delays for the holes and between the holes. And also you need to ensure that the inner hole and inner row delay control boxes have been checked. I'm going to use a chevron pattern. In this case, I'll have to run the process twice to get the desired tie-in. The process is this: select the start row, select the end row, and then select the column direction. So if I do a cat apply, I'm going to just, this is the center, so I'm going to select this hole right here, select that hole right there, and I want to go that direction. Okay, now I just do this again for the second batch. So I select that hole, and then we'll go to that hole. Okay, so after that, you need to calculate the detonation times. You need to go to the blast and then go to the blast annotation area and select what you need to annotate it, because then you can see the cumulative and detonation times within the pattern. So you go to charge, charge, calculate det times, calculate the det times. Okay, and my annotation is already set. And you can see that there's the cumulative annotation, cumulative and detonation times. So now what I need to do is do the firing on this. So if I go to charge, calculate, detonation, animate, and use a slowdown factor of 10, and if you notice the little blue circles, they're showing how the blast is being detonated. Okay, so now after all this, we can look at all these reports that are available to us. Okay, we have blast summary. The ones I would be interested in is blast summary, blast layout table, the charge table, the charge cost report, and you can also do some contours and display some cylinders. So let's just look at the blast summary report, and I just want to put it that ASCII file. Typically name it the same as my blast. Say OK. We'll do it one more time. Let's say apply this time. And you can see that after it's all said and done, we had 135 blast holes. It covered an area of 11,500 square meters, and a total of 88,000 cubic meters were shot. So that's all I have, and I'll try to answer any questions now.